Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. What does a Taco Bell drive-thru have to do with manufacturing? When it comes to connecting the top to the shop, a drive-thru and a manufacturing floor actually have a lot in common. And today I'm excited to have Monica Rothgery. She wrote the insightful book, Lessons from the Drive-Thru, Real-Life Wisdom for Frontline Leaders. She's a speaker, author, and former Taco Bell manager. Yeah, Monica just shares these different lessons and values. And I was, oh my gosh, like she's writing and reading about experiences of her climb at Yum Brands, but really she's talking about frontline leadership. And whether you're serving a drive-through or you're running a piece of equipment in a manufacturing plant and you're organizing team members and working towards a common goal and you have demands and time and cycle times, we're talking the same language. So welcome, Monica.
Thanks, Trevor.
So I met you through the Kentucky National Speakers Association and got your book. And so Diana, my wife, she read your book first and she's, you got to have Monica on your podcast. I'm like, really? And so then I read your book and just all kinds of highlights and different points. And you just had different stories about frontline leadership. And I just amazed at the similarities.
I have to say, you get two firsts. So you are my first podcast that's specializing in focused on manufacturing and leadership in manufacturing. And second, you are my first reader who actually did a full book report on my book. And your book report's so good. If I was a teacher, I would have given you an A+. But seriously, as I reflected on coming on your show, I thought about something I often say about quick service restaurants, and that is this. They are both a manufacturing facility and a retail shop because coming through the back door is raw product, ingredients, if you will. And those ingredients get built or assembled on a line. And then the actual product that's being sold 6 feet away is sold in, it's a retail environment where we have cashiers and we have advertising, but under that roof is both manufacturing and retail. And so I think you're right in identifying there are similarities in our worlds, despite maybe at first glance you wouldn't think so.
And I hope for all our manufacturing leaders listening and driving to work that they never go through a drive-through and look at it the same, because I don't. I really do look at it differently now.
What sticks out to you, like now that you read the book?
It's a fact of what goes in to like just pulling up to a drive-through and then you expect to make your quick transaction. You tap your card and you get the exact meal that you want. And if you don't want cheese on it, it's not going to have cheese. And then everything goes well, but you're not thinking about the organization that go into that, right? The repeat, like in manufacturing, we talk about standard work and repeatability.
Right.
And you're getting, like you said, you're getting raw product in through the door, but it's like an orchestra. Like it's like a conductor, like when it sounds like that's why I took away from reading your book is that you have to have clean tables. You need people at the front, you need people cleaning, you need people preparing, and then you have standards.
Yeah.
Clean green onions. Let's talk about that.
Not unlike what I think would be in a factory. Yeah, those standards are really important, starting with safety. And in our restaurants, that's physical safety of the team, but also food safety for the team and the customers. And so things like hand washing, there's a 10-step process to hand washing, which fortunately everybody learned during COVID. So that kind of helps our training.
Yeah.
But cross-contamination, time and temperature, there's a lot of equipment that needs to be maintained in a restaurant. Hot holding equipment, cold holding equipment, food prep equipment. So yeah, in that 3 minutes that you go through the drive-through, a whole lot has to go really well. And when I reflect to people who aren't in the food service industry, why it's so challenging, I describe it like this. When I was the COO for KFC, I managed to get promoted out of the restaurant manager job and
Love
stayed
that.
with Yum for a few years. But when I had 4,000 restaurants.
Wow.
And so that was tens of thousands of customers coming through our restaurants, delivery, drive-through, and dine-in, and carry-out, all hours of the day, from 10 in the morning till 10 to 12 at night. And it's run by 28-year-old leaders who have probably the least amount of education and leadership experience, yet they're managing a multi-million-dollar asset with 40 to 30 to 50 employees. What could go wrong?
Yeah, and we talk about having a 1,000,000 square foot plant and hundreds of employees, and we need to meet those standards. And obviously, and I love the fact that you said safety first as well, like safety of your team members, safety of the customers.
Yep.
And that's not negotiable. That turns companies upside down, and that's going to hurt somebody. And I mentioned the green onions because that's one of your chapters.
It-
And it's just one of those stories of clean green onions. What
Yeah.
does clean mean to you, and what does clean mean to me?
An interesting anecdote. So the story, I was having difficulty as a young manager getting a team member to wash those onions. And produce is probably one of the greatest risk factors for all sorts of food safety illnesses. Produce and hand washing are the biggest two. Cross-contamination's probably up there too. But she just refused. And eventually there's this big altercation that plays out in the restaurant. And my learning point was about understanding where your team members are coming from and not just giving orders. But interestingly enough, I think you'll appreciate this. Those Mexican pizzas no longer come with green onions. They took the ingredient off the menu because the risk was greater than the potential upside for customers. So there's this, and part of our role in leadership in organizations is to also do what we can to help team members and frontline leaders execute. So if there's a safer or an easier way to do a process, or in this case, a step to eliminate and reduce risk, sometimes that's the right call.
Yeah.
Just a little behind the scenes.
That is a cool behind the scenes. And we did try the same thing. In manufacturing, we want to simplify a process. And so how do we make it easier? Instead of getting the team member to do what we want them to do, it's like, how do we error-proof it, simplify it, reduce processes? That's interesting. But yeah, that's how you started. You realized that coming in as a military leader into running a restaurant was a big change for you. And so that whole aspect of, I was working with my book coach last night, AJ Harper, and she's a previous guest on here. And we're really looking at what's the core message of my book as I'm writing it. And the statement that we celebrated last night was, results come from deeper conversations, not telling people what to do. How does that resonate with you? And like when you started running these restaurants coming from the military?
Yeah, I think it's spot on. Some enlightened companies and some enlightened leaders think that phrase, the more you care. I think that's bullshit. Can I say bullshit on your
You just did.
Twice. And here's why. That particular team member who wasn't going to wash those green onions, it didn't matter that I explained to her that Listeria, E. coli, Salmonella, all kinds of bad things could be transmitted by not washing those onions. It didn't matter. The more she knew about it did not invoke empathy or care or concern from her.
Yeah.
What was going to invoke, and what I learned, is that team members need to know that they are cared for first, that I cared about them, not as team members, but as people with families, people with dreams, people who want to go to college. And until I understood who they were, why they were working there, and how I could specifically and uniquely help them, I wasn't going to get any care. But the minute that they believed that I was there for them, that I would do anything for them, whether that's drive them to their driving test or help them study for algebra or help them negotiate college paperwork the minute that happened, they would walk through fire. And so when I'm jammed up on Saturday night because a closer called off, I can call one of them and they're coming in not for the customer and not for the company, but they're coming in for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I absolutely believe that deeper conversations are the prerequisite for caring and for execution.
Yeah. Because when we get curious and then we have some of those conversations, we get to learn more about, like, washing the onions was never the issue.
That's
And
exactly right.
and it's like the problem on the surface is not the real problem. Rarely is it ever the real problem. The green onions were never the problem. It was the relationship.
Yep.
And it was something deeper that we may never know. But it's like, for the frontline leaders in manufacturing, if you just look at, and if someone's not following standard work, we want to focus on the standard work. No, the reason is you have to load this part first, because if not, the weld line is going to be disrupted and we want to get the consistency. And it don't matter to me, because right now I got 9 problems floating through my head and I can't even listen to what you're saying right now.
And then so often we resort to training, or my favorite word I love to destroy, retraining. And because I don't believe in it. I don't believe there's such a thing as retraining. Once you know how to do something, you don't need to be retrained. You may need a refresher if it's not something you do every day. You may need coaching on how to do it a little bit better. One of those things I love to do, I was the COO of KFC in Thailand. And sometimes I would go into a KFC in Thailand. Thailand was wild. KFC was wildly popular in Thailand. So I would
That's
go to a
awesome.
KFC. They love their fried chicken. And I might see the Colonel's original recipe on the line, not looking as good as it should. Maybe it's too dark or dry or oily. And so I would ask the manager, what's going on with this chicken? Oh, and they would be like, oh, Kun Monica, the cook he needs more training. I'm like, who trained him? I trained him, but he not remember. And their English was pretty good and they
That's
understood
awesome.
me as long as I spoke. So I said, let's play a game. So I would go back to the cook and I would offer that cook 100 baht. And that's about $3. Doesn't sound like a lot of money, but they made about 9 baht an hour. So that was a lot of money.
Today's pay.
Today's pay. Yeah. Oh, maybe they were up to 11 baht. So that's 10 hours worth of work.
Yeah.
$3. I would say, I will give you 100 baht if you can make perfect KFC original, just like the Colonel made it, fried chicken. Guess what happened?
Got a nice, perfect original
Every
chicken.
time. The guy who made the terrible chicken, who didn't know how to do it, made perfect, delicious, golden KFC original recipe. Didn't need retraining, right?
Yeah.
His lack of execution was grounded in something else, whether it was lack of recognition, lack of support. We don't know, right? But without the conversation, without someone caring to ask, he was perfectly happy just making substandard chicken. And then we blame it on training. It's not training.
Yeah. Is it just an easy excuse for, like, supervisors and managers? Yeah, they're not doing the properly. Let's have them retraining and make sure they sign off on it. Did they sign off on the training?
Sign off on it, because the golden sign off, that means everything, right? I think it's lazy leadership. I do. I think it's lazy leadership or uninformed leadership. And that's why I think your podcast is so important. And hopefully people can pick that up from my book too. It's the privilege of leadership is that, and especially when you're leading frontline workers, especially if those frontline workers are first jobbers, right? You got to meeting people where they're at in today's workplace is the unlock to productivity and execution. Guaranteed. For sure.
Yeah. And these first time, like, it's a good point. If you haven't worked a lot of jobs before and in your industry, and like thousands of people that are working on a Saturday night across the world.
Yeah.
And to be consistently showing up, you need good frontline leaders to engage the team. Yeah.
That's the beginning, middle, and end right there. Because what if your listeners do end up reading my book, they'll hear all the mistakes I made. My book's certainly not one of those, do what I do and you too shall climb the mountain to victory. It's a pretty humbling self-examination of places I could have done better. And it always stemmed in putting the spotlight more on myself, thinking I could do it on my own through just perseverance. And every time I swallowed my pride, I asked for help. I engaged with team members. Magic happened, and I got the results I really wanted in the first place.
Yeah, we almost need to be a little bit lazy as leaders around the tasks and be more curious and active around the relationship and the mind.
Oh,
What
that's
do people
golden right
expect?
there. Yeah. One of my chapters, I talk about how I put myself on a team member position because I was the fastest and the best at executing it. And while I was working that position, some bad things happened. Catastrophic kinds of things happened. No one died, but we ran
You
out
got to
of.
read it.
Yeah,
We'll
you
leave
got to
a
read
few
it.
cliffhangers here.
Yeah. But the moral of that lesson, and this is a big one for all leaders, is that in so many organizations, I see people doing the job of the person underneath them.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's misguided servant leadership. Like, oh, I need to be next to my team, roll up my sleeves. So they see me partnering with them. Sometimes it's lack of confidence in doing the next job, comfort zone. But yeah, the key to productivity, at least in my industry, and I'd be curious to hear what you say about manufacturing, is making sure everyone's performing at their role, not
Mhm.
necessarily above it, but certainly not doing the job of the people underneath them. And so if everyone can start to elevate to their role, then you unlock productivity that's being repressed. And work gets more fun because
Oh,
no one wants their boss looking over their shoulder every minute, or worse, shoving them off the line because they're faster or they think they're faster or better. That's I can't think of anything more insulting to a frontline team member than getting pushed aside.
yeah. And that takes discipline in manufacturing because this is what we see is that a frontline leader runs up, machines down, right? Okay. So everybody's into high active mode. So the frontline leader will jump in and try to get the machine back up and going because they have the experience. And then that new team member is just standing there watching. And that's what happens often when I'm watching and when I've been doing it. And even myself, I know it's addictive, right? I know that it's a fault and this is just stuck here. And if I just wiggle this wire and we reset this, but really, if I took that few extra seconds, and I'll pull a quote, my favorite quote from your book. Servant leadership is not doing the team member's job. Servant leadership is doing everything you can to support them, coach them, and celebrate them.
Yeah. I love that. That's good. That's good. Whoever wrote that's pretty good. Yeah, I see it. I would see it all the time. I'd be talking to a manager in the restaurant and they'd be nervously looking at the monitor as the orders are coming in. 3 orders, 4 orders, and now they're not really listening and engaged in the conversation with me. They're worried about their team getting in the weeds. And so they say to me, "Oh, Monica, I have to jump on the line now. Can you just hang on a minute?" And now they've known I'm coming.
Hmm.
It's a pretty big day when the COO shows up at your store. And they're doing it in the pretense of, I need to focus on the customer, which I can't find fault with. But what I then witness is they bum rush the line. They pretty much elbow their way in. They interrupt whatever flow's happening. And they just start packing orders or making burritos and tacos, whatever the case. And the team members drift away. They just amble off, check their phones, get a drink. He clears the screen and then he comes back over and talks to me. And I'm like, you just taught them a couple things. One, you don't believe in them.
Mm,
You don't believe they can manage their way through a rush.
yeah.
2, that they're not valuable enough for you to engage with. And 3, like that you're more important than they are.
Yeah.
And so why not just walk up to the line? I'm not saying abandon your team in the middle of the rush. There are times when every leader needs to roll up their sleeves, but why not walk up to them and say, "Do you need help?"
That's it.
Guess what the answer is 9 times out of 10?
No.
No, I got it. I
Yeah.
got it, boss.
Yeah.
And even if they might be a little bit slower, let them work through it. That's how
Yes.
they
And
get
it's
faster.
hard.
It's hard, yeah.
But yeah,
Sometimes they'll say yes, and then my next question, or what I coach leaders, the next question is, "Do you need help?" "Yeah." "What do you need?" And maybe they'll say, "I need to take a break," or "Can you wipe down the line?" or "Can you go get me some more ingredients?"
mm-hmm.
And then you're actually supporting them,
Yeah.
not shoving them out of the way or minimizing them.
And that's a great understanding for the listeners right now. If you're driving to work and you're thinking when you're having those conversations, and maybe you're a frontline leader or you have some there, or maybe you're a team member and you need to talk to your frontline leader, you can have a conversation and say, "Hey, I just listened to Monica's podcast. And I really like the clarification of servant leadership is not jumping in front of me and taking it
Yeah.
over. It's having a conversation of how can I serve?"
So in your situation in a factory, what would you have leaders do? How would you have them approach it when piece of equipment's down, or instead of butting in to the actual work, what would you have them do?
We have often in manufacturing, you have leadership that just gets promoted because they know the machines really well. So a lot of
Same
times
in same, yeah.
so same there. So then, and if they get promoted and if it's a smaller factory and they stay around the same area, that can be detrimental to their leadership, because some of the philosophies is promote them in an area they're familiar with because they're going to have to learn the leadership side. Don't make them learn the technical side as well. And there's advantages and
Mm,
disadvantages to that, because now it's easier for me just to fix it and not lead. And then the other aspect is that we have maintenance techs and robot techs and quality techs and engineering support, and they will jump in as well and help depending on the issue. But andons are really popular in manufacturing, which is basically you hit a button. If you can't resolve it yourself in 60 seconds, for example, then you hit the button and a light goes off at your station, then help's going to come. And what it is, it's a culture training aspect, because maintenance techs can be known for being really smart technically and then literally not even say hello and just unlock the gates and go inside the line and go fix it and not have a conversation at all. So really, it's what you said. It's back to, "Hey, good morning. I see you. What do you know about this problem?"
yeah.
And instead of just jumping in there, and when we start doing that, it's, "Oh, you're the subject matter expert, the SME. You're the person that knows this area the best." And those three statements that you gave is so true, because it's like, you're going to disengage that person and make them feel not valued by just going in there and fixing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Something you said about the decision to move somebody to a different section when they get into leadership or not, right? In the Army, when somebody gets promoted to their first leadership role, so a private first class becomes a corporal or a corporal becomes a sergeant, they get taken out of their squad and they get put into
Mhm.
another squad, because it's really difficult to lead the guy to learn how to be a leader with the guy who was, or gal who was your buddy yesterday.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So
That
the military builds that in.
and what about through the restaurant industry? Do you get moved around to different restaurants?
Not usually on that first promotion, and I do think that's a problem, because yesterday you were the one taking shortcuts and, you know, goofing around when there's no
Yeah.
customers, and now
Yeah.
you're in charge of and have to hold people accountable for doing the same thing, right? Whether
Mm.
that's blaring the music at late night and all the other shenanigans that happen when leaders aren't in charge, right? And
Mhm.
often with young leaders. And I think shadowing is a big thing. And I talk about this a little bit in the book, but the biggest thing, the most important thing a frontline leader can do to support section leaders or shift leaders, upcoming leaders, is observation.
Mm.
But we get so much into that telling mode. "Oh, I'm going to train you. I'm going to train you. I'm going to tell you how to do this. Watch me do this," instead of observing. I think it's so powerful to watch a line leader during a shift. What do they notice? What don't they notice? Where do they comment? How many of their comments are reinforcing good behaviors? How many of them are critical? Are they aloof, right? How do they interact with the team? Where do they choose to spend their time? That could provide so much rich feedback. And that's what they need, right? They don't need more telling. They need someone to reflect back to them. hey, you never even said hello when you got on the shift. You never
Yeah.
asked how Joe is because his wife had a baby last week, whatever. And so the power of observation, I think, is something we should talk more about with our frontline leaders.
I think we combine that with some curiosity of, hey, I'm observing you. And because a lot of times we're going to do that transparently. And what's going on? What are you focused on? If we can be really curious about their thinking,
Yes.
and it'd be like, I'm focused on, hey, I know you're observing, so I want to make sure that the beans are ready and that these are clean. And it's okay. That's interesting. So what do you think I'm observing you on? What's important when you first walk through the doors? Because if we can understand how people are thinking and have dialogue around that, we can
Yeah.
rewire how they think about starting their shift. I'm like, I always remember that conversation with Monica, that I didn't say hello to anybody. And I was so focused on the task, and we all do it, but we need each other to observe. So I love that. So this is already flying by, and I'm not going to end this podcast. We like to end in less than 30 minutes, and I'm not ending without the cleaning story, because this is probably the one that resonates with me the most. So in
Yeah.
manufacturing, I hear people, same thing we just said, hey, we told them this, they signed off on the procedure. Do they need to be retrained? I told them, so we have 5S, which is sort and sanitize, and we have this system to keeping the plant clean. And there's certain, put your broom back, you got to hang it on a shadow board. The station has to come to a certain clean. It's like, sometimes it's like, we told them, and I told them why it was important, and it's still not cleaned to what I think it should be cleaned to. Or this is a good weld. This isn't about good. Like when then we get into these arguments, and then we start to judge on this person on their abilities of their job. But I thought your cleaning story, every manufacturer needs to hear. Please.
This was a person that I was training to become a shift leader. And she was reached the point where she was able to work shifts on her own, closing shifts, but could never get the restaurant clean. Didn't matter how much I coached and nagged and left notes and left more notes, pointed things out. There was always like issues I would find. And one day she worked day shift with me and her car broke down and she needed a ride home. So I asked her, hey, can I give you a ride? And this goes back to caring, right? This goes back to being there when they need you.
Because you cared, you gave her a ride.
I did. We got to her place and she asked if I wanted to come up and meet her family. Now I'm at a crossroads because I don't know what the policy is about going into a team member's house. I don't know the neighborhood, but I make the decision to say yes. So we go up to this third apartment on the third floor and we walk into her home, and I hesitated to write this because I didn't want it to sound like I was judging her.
Mm-hmm.
But her home was not how my home looked.
Yeah, I think it's perfect.
Right? There was piles of dirty laundry everywhere, pizza boxes, cans, ashtrays, because that was when people still smoked inside. She had to move some dirty diapers out of the way for me to have a seat on the sofa. And I met her baby, and her partner came flying through and fished 2 socks out of the pile of clothes that were on the floor as he was headed to work. And dirty dishes everywhere. And it just struck me. I didn't have judgment on her. But what struck me is there's a reason she doesn't see the same thing I see in the restaurant when it comes to cleanliness. And I don't have the right to expect her to understand the standard of cleanliness without literally showing her. Right? I learned in the military about cleanliness and organization. I learned from my mom. But if you didn't have that background, or even if you did and you chose to live a different way, you can't assume that somebody understands the standards. Same things with friendliness. We would always say to the team members, be friendly or treat someone like you would treat them if they were a guest in your home. We don't know what happens in people's homes.
No.
And so those kinds of references fall flat and we don't know. The moral of the story is I had to work side by side with her and show her this baseboard. Let's clean this one, and then let's not clean this one, and notice the difference. This one's got black in the grout and this one's white. You can see the grout. Let's look at the trash can. This one's dirty. This one's got all of the food material in the bottom out of it. And then, only then was she able to recognize what I was asking her to do. It wasn't that she was lazy or not trying. It was that she just didn't see the same things that I saw. So a lesson that stayed with me.
I love that story, Monica.
Forever.
It so resonates with people should just know better.
Yeah. No, they
no.
shouldn't.
They don't.
No.
They really don't. If we can stop judging, and it's not about holding we think sometimes our problem is that leaders don't hold people accountable. That's not the problem.
No.
It's understanding, like, what does clean look like? What does good look like to you? Let's have a conversation about it. Man, I could talk to you for another hour, Monica. What do you want to leave our frontline leaders with in manufacturing today?
Yeah, leadership is a privilege. And being a frontline leader is, I would argue, one of the most important jobs in the country. We talk about coaches and teachers, but the reality is more of our young people interface with frontline leaders than most coaches and teachers in a really intimate, personal way, because they see them performing. They come in good days and bad days. And those frontline leaders have the opportunity to shape what they think about work for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And so the more I can do to support frontline leaders, to encourage them, to inspire them to see their job as so much more than running the drive-thru at Taco Bell or running the line in a factory. They're changing lives. And years later, when people look back, they'll remember them as their boss, their first boss, and hopefully it'll be the best boss I ever had. So that's my message to frontline leaders. Embrace your role. Read my book, Lessons from the Drive-Thru. You can get it on Amazon. And I'd love to help out whatever organizations can use help. So if you want to reach me, reach out. You can, find me on my website, monicarothgery.com, and I can chat about it.
I love it. I continue to reference to your book. Guys, it's a quick read. It's really well written. It's such a great story. And I just can't say enough greatness about this intersection. And I'm excited that for more manufacturers to bring you in to speak, get your book, talk about some of those concepts. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Trevor. It was a blast. It was really fun.
Hey, folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.